this is how we install a Hyper-V on a Windows 10 professional operating system. Okay, first thing we need to do is we need to go to Control Panel. Of course, there's also many different ways of doing this. I'm going to show you the most common way. You might find a better way, quicker way of doing this. I'm just going to find you the way that is the most common that most people actually use. So once we have Control Panel open, we then want to go to Programs. And once we're in the Programs, we want to go to Programs and Features, because that's what we want to do. We want to add a Windows feature. So this will then, of course, like you guys already know, show you all the programs that's been installed. And as you guys also know, if you click on something, you can also, of course, uninstall it. Yeah, but that's not what we're here for now. What we are going to go to is, if we go here to the left of the screen, we'll see there's an option there to turn Windows features on or off. So we select that little option. And this will then bring up a little dialog box that allows us to choose all of the features that comes with Windows 10 Professional in this case, that you can add or remove. Okay, now I just want to warn you guys a little bit here before you just start removing things that you maybe you want to save some space, so you're going to remove some features. Be very careful about what features you actually remove. Some of these features are needed for Windows to actually work. Okay, so you might be removing a feature because you are trying to save some space, and then you'll find that Windows can't connect to a shared folder, or Windows can't connect to a printer, or it can't open up a Office document. Okay, it can't run Office. So just be careful. Don't just remove features because you want to. Feel free to add features, but of course also do your own little bit of research. What is this feature? Why is that feature there? Why would we use this feature? Okay. Specifically, at the moment, we are going to be adding the Hyper-V feature, which you guys can see over here, if your screen can actually view that. Unfortunately, I can't make it any bigger. As you can see, I already have a tick mark next to Hyper-V. That is because I have already installed it. And the reason that I have already installed it is because Hyper-V will restart your computer during the installation. Okay, it might restart it once, sometimes it restarts it twice. Okay, so I couldn't record a video and show you guys on the stream how to install it because we would have lost connection halfway through the installation process. But all you would have done is just put a little tick mark in the checkbox next to Hyper-V, click on OK, and then a box will pop up to say that it's busy installing Hyper-V, and a couple of minutes later, depending on how fast your computer is, it will tell you now that you are going to have to restart your computer to continue the installation. It will restart when you click on the button, and it then might actually restart again afterwards, twice restarts, and then afterwards it would come back to Windows, and voila, you have installed Hyper-V. Now, because it's a Windows feature, no shortcut will be created for you. Okay, so you have to create your own shortcuts if you want to be able to access it easily. So what we will do is we'll click on Start, and then of course we'll just start typing in Hyper-V, and you guys will see that we will have something called the Hyper-V Manager. Okay, this is now the actual piece of software that is used to run, create, manage, configure virtual machines in your environment. Okay, now I've moved my camera a little bit down out of the way so that you can see what Hyper-V actually looks like. Okay, so once we're in Hyper-V, now we need to start creating virtual machines. So the first thing that we'll need to do is here all the way on the left hand side of the screen, we'll have a setting called Hyper-V, and then your computer name, which in my case, I haven't really renamed my computer after I've reinstalled Windows, so my computer name is still Desktop IN41AGV. Okay. The random custom name that is created when you install Windows. You will have your computer name, whatever your computer name is, that will be shown for you in that little section. So you have to click on that server. The reason we do that is because Hyper-V Manager can allow you to centralize the management of your virtual machines across multiple physical servers. So I can install Hyper-V on 5 machines, but then connect all of those Hyper-Vs to one central computer that I can manage all those servers from a central location. Okay, which of course makes life a little bit easier. Hey? So make sure you select your computer name that you have. Then you see we'll have 3 little windows in the middle. The top window will show you all the virtual machines that you have. If they're running, if they stop, it will show you how much memory they are using, how much percentage of your processor they are using. The middle screen will show you all the checkpoints or the snapshots that you have created of your virtual machines. For those that might have forgotten, remember checkpoints, or also sometimes called snapshots, are little copies of the virtual machine that you've created that makes a copy of the machine at a certain point in time. So it's sort of like a backup, but it's not an actual backup because the snapshots are not stored on an external drive. So it's not on a tape drive or an external USB or anything like that. The snapshot checkpoints actually stays on the local hard drive. Okay, so it's not a backup as what we talked about yesterday, when we did that last little lesson there. And then the bottom screen will give you more details about your actual installation. Of course, we will go through these screens and you will see what they look like if we actually now have created virtual machines. Then all the way on the right, we have what we call the action menu, where we have a lot of little wizards that will allow me to do certain things. Things like creating new virtual machines, creating new virtual switches, creating new virtual disks, stopping servers, starting servers, and even a help menu. Okay. So like I said, here on the right hand side, we have the action menu. A lot of little wizards. They can be used for different things. We, of course, are going to be looking at most of these wizards, okay, as we go through our little practical today. But the first one that we're looking for is the one right at the top, where we have something called New. Okay, so if we click on New, you can see we have an option to create a new virtual machine, create a new virtual hard drive, or even create a new virtual floppy disk. Okay. Of course, at this point in time, we want to create a new virtual machine. So we select that option. And then we have the new virtual machine wizard. A step-by-step guide that allows you to create virtual machines in Hyper-V. So we click on next. And then the first thing is ask us, what do you want to call this virtual machine? So we're going to call it Test Server 2012 R2. Okay. Now, be careful. This is not the computer name of the virtual machine. This is the name of the virtual machine itself. Once you've installed an operating system on that virtual machine, then you can also change the computer name for that operating system. But this is a good way for you to give it a meaningful name that will tell you exactly what this virtual machine is doing. Why do we have it? Is it for testing? Is it for production? Is it my DNS server, my file server, my domain controller? What type of virtual machine is it actually going to be? The second option is, where do we want to save the files for these virtual machine that we are going to create? By default, it saves it in the program data folder on the C drive. Now, if you've got any type of corporate environment, that is not where you want to save your virtual machines. You'll save it on a file server somewhere or in a specified folder that you have created. So we are going to change that location by going to Browse, and I have already created a folder called VM. Okay, that will allow me to save all my virtual machines in there. So I'll select VM, click on Select Folder. Okay, so now we have the location of where we are going to save all the files required for that virtual machine. Then we go next. The next option is, what generation of virtual machine do you want to create? We have generation 1 and generation 2. If you're running older operating systems, let's say Windows 95, Windows 98, maybe Windows XP, you are going to be creating a generation 1 virtual machine. So think of generation 1 as your older hardware. But if you've got anything above or including Windows 7, so Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, then you are going to be creating a generation 2 virtual machine. Okay. Always try to create Gen 2 because it gives you more features, more settings, more security than what a Gen 1 virtual machine does. So we'll select generation 2 and click on Next. Then it's going to ask us how much memory do we want to assign to this virtual machine. By default, it supplies 1 gig, 1024 megabyte, which equals to 1 gig. I am going to give this virtual machine 4 gigs of RAM, or let's make it 8 gigs. Let's make it a little bit quicker. Hey? So how do we know how much megabytes is 8 gigs? Well, you can take 1024 and you can times it by 8. So if you open up your calculator, let me just put it on the screen itself. You say 1024 is 1 gig of data. So if I times it by 8, 8192 is then equal to 8 gigs of data. Okay, so now we've got 8 gigs. Keep in mind here though, hey, remember we only have a certain amount of physical RAM, so we cannot give it more RAM than what we have physically. And also remember, if we have more virtual machines, they all need to share that RAM. So all of the machines that are running, not all the machines that are created, but the virtual machines that are running will share the amount of physical RAM that I have. Okay, so we talked about that. Hey, we also have an option in here to use dynamic memory. I suggest we always select this option. Dynamic memory means that the virtual machine can use more RAM if it requires, or use less RAM if it doesn't need as much. So if my server doesn't need 8 gigs of RAM because it's not doing anything, it will only use 2 gigs, and the other 6 gigs can be provided for other virtual machines in your network. Okay. So it will automatically decrease and increase the amount of RAM that can be given to this virtual machine. Okay. So once we sorted out the RAM, we click on Next. The next screen asks us, do we want to connect this virtual machine to any type of virtual switch that I've created? Now, I've not created a virtual switch as yet, so I'm going to show you guys a bit later how to actually connect this now to a virtual switch to connect it to a network. Okay. So for now, we're just going to leave it as not connected. No network cable plugged in at this moment. And we'll go next. This screen allows us now to create a virtual hard drive, because every machine needs RAM, which we set up. It needs a network card, which we didn't connect. And thirdly, it needs a hard drive. So this asks us, what do we want to call that virtual hard drive? It will have the same name as the actual virtual machine. Where do we want to save this virtual hard drive? Again, it will be in the same location of where we selected that folder in the beginning, but we can change it if we want. And lastly, what size hard drive do we need? Okay, now I'm going to give it only 50 gigs because we don't need anything more than that. Even 50 gigs is going to be way too much. We can actually make it 40 gigs. Okay, again, be careful. You cannot give it more space than what you physically have available on your physical hard drive. Okay. You also have a second option here to attach an existing virtual hard drive. So if you have a virtual hard drive that you've created already, you can attach it to this virtual machine, or you can say that I will attach a hard drive later. Don't bother me now. Now, we're going to choose the first option. Please create the virtual hard drive for us. Okay, and then we'll say next. Then it's going to ask us, do you want to install an operating system? You can install an operating system later. You can install an operating system from a bootable image file or an ISO file. And if you have connected it to a network adapter in a previous step, you can also install an operating system over the network. Okay, which you can see down here. Mine is grayed out because remember we did not connect it to a network. Okay. Now I'm going to be installing Server 2012 and I'm going to be installing it a bit later. Okay, so we'll just say for now, install an OS later. Then we'll say next. It will give us all the details that we've just entered, just for us to have a view, to make sure that we're happy with everything. And if we're happy with all the settings, we just say finish. And you can then see Hyper-V will create the virtual machine for us. And now we have our virtual machine over there. Test Server 2012 R2. The state is off. It's not using any processor, no memory, because it's not running. Hey? So now I have a VM. So now what do I do with this VM? If I double click on the VM, it basically allows us to connect to it. Okay, so now we're telling Hyper-V, I want to work on this virtual machine. And we get this screen where it tells us that our virtual machine is turned off. And if we want to turn it on, we have to press the power button. In this case, click on Start. So if we click on Start, it's going to start up the virtual machine. Now, of course, this is not going to do anything now, hey? So why is it not doing anything? It's not doing anything because remember we have not installed an operating system, hey? So this virtual machine is basically telling us, well, sorry, you pressed the power button, but I did not find a VM. Because I did not find a virtual machine, I cannot actually start the operating system. So we can then just stop it. You can see we've got buttons up here. We have the turn off button, we have the shutdown button, and we have the save button. So if we just say shut down, it's basically like us pressing the power button on the computer. Server sometimes throws an error, so we then might have to do turn off, which will then turn off the virtual machine. Okay, so that's how easy it is to create a virtual machine in Hyper-V. Now, using any other virtualized software or hypervisor software like VMware or Citrix or VMbox, they will of course have their own settings that you need to worry about, their own wizards of how to create a VM. Okay, so I can't show you all, unfortunately, mainly because we don't have the time and I don't have that software over here on my PC. And again, we are a Microsoft college, so we concentrate on the Microsoft versions of things. Okay, cool.